WGBH TV Boston presents Crockett's Victory Garden.
Welcome to Crockett's Victory Garden. I'm Jim Crockett. You see what we're doing today, digging these beautiful leeks. The only way that you get leeks that look like this, that I know of, is to put about 6 inches of compost down in the bottom of that soil, on the bottom of the trench before you plant those little leek seedlings. These are some that we planted in May, harvesting in November. Mighty hard to beat leeks like this. Well, that's not all of our harvest today. I'd like you to see what else we've been picking this morning. This gives you a pretty good idea of the type of harvest that we can get even in November here in Crockett's Victory Garden. Begin with some celery and cabbages. There are actually 4 different kinds of lettuce in here, different varieties of lettuce. This beautiful early purple head cauliflower. We have kale and collards, pansies. Those pansies that we planted the middle of July are already in blossom, as you see. Turnips, Swiss chard, that beautiful Waltham butternut squash, parsley, broccoli, tomatoes. These tomatoes are the ones that we picked green and ripened in a cooler along with an apple to give that little ethylene gas to cause them to ripen. Carrots, more leeks, chives, great harvest, and this is what you can get in your garden even in the middle of November. Well, today we're going to talk about a still more harvest, and that has to do with some vegetables which we planted last spring and you haven't heard from since. For example, the Jerusalem artichokes. Then we have some parsnips, which we planted in April, and some Witloof chicory that we haven't touched since early in the spring. Then I'm going to go in the greenhouse and show you how to make a miniature greenhouse from a mason jar. And in our plant clinic, I'm going to talk about how to save a lantana. Well, let's go first of all to look at these Jerusalem artichokes. Now, I've been digging some of these this morning. I want to show you just what it is that we have. First of all, you see the plants here beside me, these tall things. I've been digging at these roots. And this is what we planted this spring. Now, the Jerusalem artichoke, sometimes called the sunchoke, is a Native American sunflower, was used by the American Indians as a food, is very delicious and unique in that it does not have starch but has inulin. It's a kind of a food which is good for diabetics. It's tasty for anyone. These can be eaten sliced raw or baked or boiled. Any way that you would fix potatoes, you can fix Jerusalem artichokes. Now, we planted a tuber less than half this size at this point, and I'm going to pull this thing from the ground now, and I want you to see what kind of return we get for our investment. This is the type of thing from one tiny piece of root and all these lovely tubers. These are the kinds this is what you get from your Jerusalem artichoke. A truly great vegetable, needs no care, nothing bothers it. It's as hardy as the rock of Gibraltar. Any of these little roots, as small as that, left in the soil this winter will come up to make a plant here next year. So, if you have never tried Jerusalem artichokes, that's one of the new crops for you to try. Rather hard to find these bulbs, but we bought ours in a supermarket this spring. But try them, the Jerusalem artichoke. Well, now let's go over and look at our parsnips. Now, I should say that parsnips are best after they've been frozen. And that is, most gardeners leave them in the ground over winter and dig them in March or April. But they are still good if they're dug at this time of year. And we're going to dig one now because you saw me plant the parsnip seed here in the middle of April. Okay, that's what we have. A pretty good root. This is the parsnip called Harris Hollow Crown. A very nice sized root. If you want to enjoy parsnips, you want to try sauteing these in a little butter. So sweet. and the sweetness is enhanced by freezing. Now, I'm not going to dig any more this fall, but next spring I'll be in here digging these, and that's when the flavor is going to be most superb. A great vegetable, relatively few gardeners grow it, but I tell you, if you haven't done it before, you just don't know what you're missing when you miss parsnips. Well, next to it we have another vegetable, surely more unique perhaps than the parsnips, and that is the Witloof chicory. First of all, let's describe the plant. If you've seen along in the roadsides in August a flower with a blossom that's azure blue, about an inch and a half across, and each petal looks as though someone had taken a pair of scissors and cut the edges off, or the ends off each petal, that would be the blossoms of the Witloof chicory. This plant is a native European wildflower, has escaped and naturalized in this country. Well, we planted some seeds here in early May. We haven't done a thing to the plants. You don't have to spray them. They can give it rather indifferent soil, but they grow beautifully all by themselves, and these plants will not blossom, would not blossom the first year. They will blossom only the second year. But we're not going to go for their blossoms. We're going to go for one of the most expensive and delicate vegetables that is known to any gourmet. Let's start by digging one of these plants right out of the ground here. Show you just what it is we're looking for. Again, like the parsnip, this thing has an enormous root system on it. I'm going to just take this up on top of my compost pile and cut off the top. Okay, now a root like this we're now going to put in a special forcing box, and let me show you what we have built here. Here I have a box about 15 or 18 inches deep. I'm going to take this root and get it down here in the box so that there is at least 6 inches of space above the top of the root that will be covered. Now I'm going to mix in here sand and peat moss, and we're going to cover this whole business up. I put in a number of roots, of course, and crowd them right in as tight as we want to. We're going to cover over the top eventually so that the tip, and we'll take this out again to show you, but the tip of this root will be covered by that much sand within the box. I'll put this down cellar in absolute darkness, and if you don't have darkness, make a cover like this to go over your box. The root will start to grow from the top here and will be growing underneath this pile of sand that you have over it, damp sand and peat moss. Therefore, the leaves will come out white, and you'll end up with this material right here. This is the Belgian endive or Witloof chicory that comes right from the top of the stem like this. As you see, it'll come right underneath the sand. You reach down and snap those off, and you get a second crop from them also. Try this as a salad vegetable. To give you an idea of how unique these are selling today for 89 cents for a half pound. And this is early in the season. You wait until midwinter and see what the prices are. Again, for the price of 25 cents worth of Witloof chicory seed, you can have as many dollars worth of this beautiful Witloof chicory as you desire. This is one more of the unusual crops that you want to grow. Well, on my way by to the greenhouse, stop here just for a minute to talk about the Brussels sprouts. Someone said to me the other day, you know, it's been such a warm November that I haven't had the real freezing temperatures to make my Brussels sprouts taste at their best. And that's true. A few more nights like last night, however, and we will. You'll enjoy these plants. By the way, if you can just leave these right in the garden right up until the time the ground freezes, pull them out and put them in your garage. Even the little Brussels sprouts themselves can freeze just as solid as ice cubes. Take them off. They'll be better eating then than they are at any other time between. Well, let's look in the greenhouse. And I want to talk to you about some of those Gladiolus corms that we dug about 2 weeks ago. Well, let's pour some of these right out here. Remember, we dug the Gladiolus, cut off the stem about 1.5 inches from the bulb. That bulb, call it a bulb, it's a corm. It was just as firm and plump as you could imagine. I pointed out at that time 2 things. First of all, there are these little fellas here called the cormels. These are tiny things which are not seeds, but they're miniature bulbs. These will grow in a couple of years to become flowering sized plants. The way to clean up and store a Gladiolus bulb is this. You break off at this time, after it's dried, this old shriveled up bulb or corm. This is the one that was planted last spring in the garden. This has run its life's course and is through. You can see down in here we can peel off a few more cormels like that. All of those are worth saving. Well, the next thing to do after you have peeled those off, you put them in a paper bag just for a minute or so. These cleaned off bulbs. Put in a little insecticide and fungicide mixture. For example, let's say you use the dust that you would ordinarily use for your rose bushes. Very good for keeping out disease and any insects that might be on the Gladiolus tubers. Put them in like that, shake them around a little bit, and then you take these corms out, put them in, say, something like a nylon stocking. Hang them in your cellar in a place about 45 or 50 degrees, and they'll keep perfectly, beautifully over winter, ready to plant out again next spring. So that takes the way to handle the Gladiolus, a very lovely bulb, and you know you can keep them going from year after year after year. They will multiply, and that's one of the nice parts of gardening. Well, let's have a little progress report on some of the things that have been growing here in the greenhouse this week. I've been keeping you up to date on our bean. Well, this is look at the size of that. It's all ready for picking. One of the little beans growing here, just a single plant on a single flower pot, but you can imagine a child could have a lot of fun growing his own bean plant. Okay, here we come to the cucumber. Doubled in size in the last week, now nearly 2 inches long. That's the one you saw me fertilize just a week ago. Then we have our paper white narcissus coming in here, and this beautiful one called Soleil d'Or, so fragrant. And then the amaryllis, planted 2 weeks ago, and look what's happened. This enormous stalk terminated by the big flower bud, which will open into blossoms. There will be 4 blossoms on that, each of which will be from maybe 6 to 8 inches across, like amazing, in this instance, orange lilies. Then the leaves coming up right beside it are long strap-like leaves. Will be green, and they'll be the ones which will keep growing to make the plant build up the strength for blossoming another year. Next to it, we have the calla lily. Not a true lily, but a white-flowered plant. It's making very good growth. I'd like you to see here at the root growth, which has already started in just a couple of weeks' time. This plant very soon is going to need transplanting into a larger pot, and eventually we'll have those lovely white flowers from that one. Well, we'll put some of these things aside for a minute, and we'll talk about the Eucharis lily. Again, not a true lily, but sometimes called the Eucharis or the Amazon lily. A very handsome plant. Let me move this over on my bench where you can see it a little bit better. The flowers remind me very much of a very fragile narcissus, and they're not related in any, even the most remote way, but a fragrant white flower which does quite well as a houseplant, rather an unusual thing. I've been growing this in my home greenhouse just for the fun of it for a number of years. These plants do not like to be transplanted often. They blossom best of all when they are rather crowded in the pot. Give this plant food about once every 2 or 3 weeks and it will blossom year after year. This is the Eucharis or Amazon lily. Here we have another plant with a really a strange name. Let me show you first of all the plants themselves. Now this one is called the Streptocarpus, and the name itself is pretty awful. You see the white ones and the red ones and the blue ones here, or purple. That's the Streptocarpus, which sounds like a disease, but it isn't. This is also known as the Cape primrose. It is not a primrose, and the name Cape means that it comes from the Cape section of South Africa. The plant is related to the African violet and the gloxinia, and it does well in the same kind of growing conditions. That is, it likes temperatures that are up around 70 degrees most of the time. It likes a soil which is barely moist, a little plant food about every 2 weeks. Now these plants can be propagated from leaves, but this is a hybrid which comes in many, many colors. And the way to get the greatest variety of colors from plants such as this is to plant the seeds. And I'm going to show you, first of all, on planting the seeds, how tiny the seeds themselves are, and that's why we have a unique method of planting them. Now, I can show you the package, but I can hardly see the seeds in here myself. They are just like dust. Well, were we to plant these on the surface of an ordinary flower pot and water them from the top, of course they would be washed down into the crevices, and maybe one in a dozen or 100 might grow. What I want to do is to beat the odds, and the way to beat the odds is to give these little seeds their own miniature greenhouse. Well, a good miniature greenhouse for transplanting things of this nature is an ordinary mason jar. Now notice that I set the mason jar itself in a little bed of sand, and that keeps it from tipping on me. All right, now this is going to be the greenhouse that I'm going to plant those seeds in. But let me show you the kind of soil that I'm going to use. As a matter of fact, I should say this is not regular soil. This is some of our compost, right straight from our compost pile, that you saw me heat up and pasteurize on that outdoor cooker, the outdoor grill here a few weeks ago. We're going to sift it in here and break this down rather finely. Get a rather fine soil mixture. Now this is pasteurized, so we've killed weed seeds and we've killed any disease organisms that might be in there. Now, simply uncap my little greenhouse, take a clean knife or a wood label as I'm doing here, and we'll just put in some soil, some of this compost. I call it soil, but actually that is our true compost with the nutrients and a lot of organic matter in it. We'll make a little seed bed in there, sort of level that off and tamp it down fairly smoothly. Now comes the tricky part. We want to open up these seeds, the seed package here, without a wind or an added breath, and put the seeds on the label. Perhaps you can see those little tiny specks on the label. Tip them right inside and then shake them loose. That's all there is to planting them. Now we'll moisten them. Here I'm going to use a little sprayer just to moisten the inside a little bit. Now I don't want the soil wet and I don't want it dry, just barely moist. We'll put the cap on it, and this little greenhouse now will go in a place where there is no direct sun, say at a north window. providing the temperature is about 70 or 75 degrees, without a lot of light but without full sun. In 2 or 3 weeks those plants will be up. Well, starting with seed as small as that, we're going to have very small seedlings. I'll be taking those out with just the tip of my knife blade when I get ready for transplanting them. All right. Now, on our plant clinic today, I want to talk about this particular plant known as the lantana. I should say there are two kinds of lantanas. This one is called lantana camara with the orange or pink blossoms or yellow blossoms, and then there's another one called lantana montevideensis, which has lavender flowers. Their culture is the same. This plant has been growing in very good condition all summer long. It's still blossoming, which is rather unique because whoever had this plant and brought it in for me today has been giving it good care. Otherwise, it would have been through flowering. Lantana likes a lot of light and long days to blossom. Well, in order to keep this plant going for another year, I would assume that since it's grown all summer in this relatively small pot, that it's going to need to be repotted. And so we'll tap it out of the pot and check the root system. Well, that's always a good idea. And you know, you never hurt a plant by checking its root system if you do it this way. Simply tip it upside down, hold the edges of the stems away, and tap the pot edge against a firm bench. Then you can lift that pot right off, and here is your root system. Well, now what you see, so you won't be confused, this whiteness that you see in here, those are pebbles which we use as drainage. And I'm going to move those over into a larger pot. So we can use the same drainage again. But you notice that there's a mass of roots in here, absolutely solid roots all the way through. So this plant is in need of repotting first of all. So let's just give it a new lease on life. We'll set it in a little bit larger flower pot. In this instance, about roughly an inch larger in all directions. You know that when we pot a plant such as this, you be sure that you firm down on the edges. Push that soil down with your fingers, or if you don't want to use your fingers, use a little stick and firm it down. I must tell you that when you repot, be sure to firm the edges for this very reason. When you go to water a plant that hasn't been planted properly, that is, if the soil is still loose on the edges, the water will go to the easiest part, go right down the sides and out the bottom hole, and the plant will die. So this is how you handle your lantana, repot it, and it will blossom all winter long. You can prune it back a little bit to make the plant bushy if you want to. Well, if you have questions on gardening, would you send them to Crockett's Victory Garden, WGBH, Boston 02134. Well, let's see what we have for questions here today. Well, now here's one from Edward Matson of South Harwich, Mass. Said, "Dear Mr. Crockett, please comment on the use of seaweed as fertilizer and mulch." Well, first of all, Mr. Matson, you're lucky if you have some seaweed, because seaweed, of course, develops in the ocean where there's every known mineral has been dissolved. Therefore, the seaweed picks up some of those trace elements which are so great in gardening. You can dig that into your soil, or you can use it as a mulch around your plants, eventually throw it on your compost pile, or let it rot down in the garden. An excellent material. This is from Joe McGrahan of East Bridgewater, Mass. Dear Mr. Crockett, when I start plants from seed in the house, they grow several inches tall within a day or so and then die. Well, what's wrong? Well, that's called damping off. That comes of planting seeds too closely. Be very sparingly when you sow seeds. Also, water them in the morning so that the surface of the soil is dry at night, and that will usually take care of damping off without using any chemicals at all. Well, here's one from Ruth Collins, Milton. Dear Mr. Crockett, I started an African violet from a cutting 3 years ago, and now it's large and lush but never flowers. Why? Well, when you say it's large and lush, it would make me think that the plant is not getting enough light. a plant should not be, an African violet should not get large and lush. It should be rather compact. So put the plant closer to a window, an east window or a north window, a great place for African violets. Let me see, a lemon tree from seed. Planted a lemon tree, a seed 5 years ago, now have a big tree, but it never bears fruit. What can I do? Well, you probably can't make it bear fruit either. This type of a plant lemon trees are never grown commercially in that way. You always get a lemon, but you wait forever and ever and ever. It's much better for you to buy a plant, let's say, of a ponderosa lemon or a Meyer lemon, both of which are available as houseplants, and they'll blossom and bear fruit when they're 18 inches tall, let's say. Beautiful plants. All right, this is from Peter and Joan General in Swansea, Mass. Can you suggest a plant that can thrive in an office with no windows? Yes, there's one called the cast iron plant, known as aspidistra, and it will grow in the most terrible places, but that is one. Ask for the cast iron plant or aspidistra. Now, another question. This is from Amelia Krukowski of Northampton, Mass. Please tell us the state and area in which your beautiful vegetables and flowers are grown, as shown each week. Well, this is right in Boston, right in the shadow of the Harvard Stadium. This is on the grounds of the WGBH studio, right next to a parking lot. We began with parking lot soil this spring, so we've had to do a lot for it. Well, we have another question here. The question which came up to me has to do with this particular plant. Someone wrote and said, my Christmas cactus blooms each year in October. Why? Well, let me tell you, this is not even a Christmas cactus blossoming in October. This is an Easter cactus blossoming in November. I don't know why, but so long as my plants blossom, I don't question them that closely. If you can get them to blossom, all the more power to you. Well, I have a special announcement for you, and that is that this is the last program of this series on our outdoor garden. I hope that you have enjoyed it as much as I have. I certainly have enjoyed especially those thousands of cards and letters that you've sent, which have not only given me great encouragement, but have helped me to guide the program week by week. I hope my answers have been helpful to you and that you've had a better garden this year than ever before. I also want to thank the staff, the cameramen, and all of the people behind the scenes that have made this program possible. I want to tell you that we have plans already made for next year's garden, and we're certainly hoping that we'll get to have you see Crockett's Victory Garden in our bicentennial year in 1976. Have a nice winter.